Are you ready to file your 1099 returns? Let us show you how. When this lesson is over, you'll be able to identify what types of 1099 forms Accounts Payable handles and how the information prints. And you'll be able to generate, print, and e-file your 1099s. Hi, Brent. Are you all ready to file your 1099 returns?
I think I'm all set. I followed the preparation guidelines listed in the Year-End Procedures Guide. I've entered, posted, and paid all the invoices for my filing year. Not only did I reconcile the 1099 amount paid totals, but I also ran reports to make sure that we have accurate vendor information. I've made sure that all the vendors who need 1099 forms have the 1099 checkbox selected in their vendor setup.
That's great.
Oh, and I also went to the IRS website and downloaded the filing instructions.
Yes, it's always a good idea to look these over every year. And make sure you install the year-end version of the software and the Aatrix update before you generate government tax forms and reports.
Let's talk about the types of 1099 forms. Aside from the 1099 miscellaneous income form, what other forms can we generate in Accounts Payable?
The types of forms are listed on the Vendor Setup on the 1099 Settings tab. Accounts Payable can generate the 1099 Non-Employee Compensation, 1099 Miscellaneous Income, 1099 Interest Income, and the 1099 Dividends forms. And the form that's selected on the Vendor Setup is the type of form that it will generate for that vendor.
Okay. And Accounts Payable only generates a form for those vendors that have the checkbox Vendor receives a Form 1099 selected.
Yes, that's correct. The 1099 form that you'll need depends on the copy. For more information on which forms to order, refer to the Sage Knowledge Base article called Which Forms Should I Order for Year-End? Whether you need the red pre-printed form or the blank perforated 4-part form, Sage Construction and Real Estate Forms is your source. Use the contact information here to place your order. If the vendor has agreed to receive their 1099 statement electronically, you can check the electronic 1099 box and enter their email address on the vendor setup. Take note that you must have written consent from the recipients in order to send them electronic 1099 returns. Sage has a blank consent form that you can send to your vendors. It's attached to Knowledge Base article 87584. Let's see how to generate the 1099 information and file the returns. In the Tasks menu, there's an item called Government eFile and Reporting. This takes you to Form 1099, where you can generate e-file forms through Aatrix software. You can generate both 1099 and 1096 forms. This task provides a step-by-step process where you specify the form you want to generate and the vendors to include. There's also a step to review and edit the filing information before you generate the forms. When you use this task to generate 1099s, you can print copy B for the recipients on the blank perforated forms. In fact, if you don't have time to print and mail the copies out yourself, Aatrix software can do it for you. It can even go paperless and deliver the recipient copies electronically. All you need to do is to generate the filing information and Aatrix will handle the rest. I'll show you how it works in a moment. In this first screen, you enter some preliminary information to get started. Select the form that you're preparing and the reporting year. By default, it shows the current 1099 year in Accounts Payable. If you've moved on to a new 1099 year already, select the correct year for which you're filing the returns. If you have multiple fiscal entities set up in General Ledger and you track 1099 totals by GL prefix, select By Fiscal Entity under Amounts to Report. Then in the box next to GL prefix, select the entity for which you're processing the returns. You process the returns for one prefix at a time, and the reportable payment amount that prints for each recipient is by prefix. If the entity's federal ID number is entered on the prefix setup in General Ledger already, it's automatically entered here. If it's not on the prefix setup, or if it was entered incorrectly there, you can type in the federal ID number here. If there's only one entity filing the returns, select To Vendor under Amounts to Report, and enter the payer's federal ID number. The reportable payment amount for each recipient in this case is taken from the 1099 amount paid stored on the vendor setup. Don't forget to put in the minimum reporting amount. You can find out what it is from the IRS instructions. Click Next. The next screen shows you a list of vendors that fit the criteria from the previous screen, and they're all checkmarked to include in this run. If for some reason you want to exclude one or more vendors, select the row and uncheck the box. You can hold the Control key down on your keyboard and select multiple rows. Then use the spacebar on the keyboard to select or clear the checkboxes. You can also use the Select None and Select All buttons to clear or select all the checkboxes at once. When you're ready, click Next. Now that you've completed the preliminary information, you can begin to generate the 1099s. Click Generate. In the 1099 Setup wizard, you can choose to do a test run of all the vendors or the first 25. If you choose a test run, you can review the information and see how the process works, but it doesn't save your work. If you choose the last option to start processing, you can save your work to review or change later. Click Next. Verify the payer's tax ID number. This is the federal ID number from the very first screen and will be used to generate all the forms. If this number is wrong, click Cancel and begin the task again, this time entering the correct tax ID number. Click Next. If you have vendors stored in different data files and you're reporting them under the same payer's federal ID number, you can use the Multiple Data File Merge feature to merge them together so all the information is combined when you're printing or e-filing your 1099s. Click Next. The payer information comes from the software, either from the company settings window or from the prefix setup. Complete any missing information, or if needed, you can change the information that's automatically entered. Click Next. Select the preparer type and click Next. Enter your state tax account number for 1099 state reporting. Click Add. Select the state and type of tax and enter the tax account number. If you skip entering the state tax information in the 1099 Setup wizard here, you can still access this screen later in the Preparer window through Edit Company Setup. Click Next. Are there vendors who would prefer to receive their copy of the 1099 electronically? If so, select Yes here. Please note that in order to provide electronic copies instead of paper copies of the 1099s to recipients, the IRS requires that you have written consent from these individuals. Sage has a blank consent form that you can use. It's attached to Knowledge Base Article 87584. In the Recipient Identification Number step, indicate how you want to format the recipient's tax ID number and how zeros should appear on their copy. Click Next. Based on the information stored in the database, the system creates a spreadsheet listing the vendors for which a 1099 will be generated. This is called the Preparer window. The vendors are in the rows, and the columns represent boxes on the 1099. You can use the scroll bars to see additional columns. Note that the type of 1099 form that you're processing determines the columns that appear here. Let's compare the spreadsheet to an actual 1099 form. The example shown here is the 1099 non-employee compensation form. The columns in the left area of the spreadsheet are for the recipient information. The columns in the right area of the spreadsheet are for the reportable amounts. Again, depending on the type of 1099 that you're processing, the columns in the spreadsheet will vary based on the boxes on the actual form. The 1099 Preparer window is a wizard, and each step prompts you to verify the information that's highlighted in the grid. If you've reconciled the 1099 totals and verified the vendor information using Accounts Payable reports beforehand, then everything should be correct. During this review process, you can enter information in any column to have it print on the 1099. What you enter here only affects this spreadsheet and does not change the information stored in Accounts Payable. At any step, if the system detects a problem, it will alert you, and the errors are highlighted in red. If you had selected Yes to electronically deliver the recipient copies in the wizard, the grid displays the electronic only and electronic delivery columns. Based on the vendor setup, for those vendors who have elected to receive their 1099 electronically, the electronic only box is automatically checked and the email address is pre-filled. Again, the columns on the right represent the reportable amounts. Accounts Payable automatically generates the reportable amount in a certain box based on your selection in the 1099 Settings tab of the vendor setup. If you need to report an amount in any other box, just type it in the spreadsheet in order for it to print in that box on the form. You can add or remove vendors from this spreadsheet. Open the Edit menu to insert or delete rows. For example, you set up one vendor in the database, but it's actually two entities, and you need to send out two separate 1099s, one for each tax ID number. Insert a new row to enter information for the additional 1099 recipient. From the Edit menu, you can also use Company Setup to go back to the Payer Information window to make any changes if needed. If this is not a test run, you can save your work and come back to it later. When the information in the spreadsheet is complete, click Next. In this window, you choose how you want to generate the forms and file the returns. For a small fee, you can let Aatrix print and mail the 1099s to the recipients and e-file the returns for you. But if you'd rather handle this yourself, select Other Options. You can print copy B for the recipients and let Aatrix e-file the returns for you. You can also print the federal and state copies and mail them in. In that case, you can uncheck the e-file options. In this demonstration, we'll check all the boxes so you can see what happens. Click Next. Review the list of forms that you're about to generate. You can print this list out for your records. Click Next. And look! The completed forms appear on your screen. You can tell the form and copy type by the name listed on the top yellow bar. Notice the arrows on the upper left-hand corner. You can use them to scroll from page to page to review the information. Follow the instructions to print the copies and then click Next Step to go to the next set of reports until you're finished. When you're all done with the reports, if you had chosen the eFiling option, it will take you to the Aatrix eFile Center. If you're already enrolled with Aatrix, log in with your ID to complete the e-filing process. After logging in, you'll see information about the pricing, e-file submission dates, and final confirmation of the e-file submission and request. To go back to your saved work, start the Form 1099 task again. And choose Saved 1099 Report. Select the form and payer's federal ID number. Select the 1099 report. Use the buttons at the top of this window to view, print, or edit the reports. Now that you're done with this lesson, you should be able to identify which 1099 forms are supported in Accounts Payable and how the information prints, and you should be able to generate the 1099 information and file your returns.